Blood streamed down Maya Wilson's face as the police officer's rough hand tightened around her wrist. "Please, I was just buying groceries," she gasped, her eyes red and voice trembling. Not just from pain, but from humiliation. A siren wailed in the distance, distinct from a police siren. Everyone froze and turned their heads. A convoy of military vehicles roared in, their tires screeching against the asphalt, producing a chilling sound. The officers shuddered upon recognizing the emblem on the lead vehicle. United States Army. The man who stepped out, bearing the rank of colonel, was Marcus Wilson, Maya's husband. Just a few weeks earlier, Maya Thompson, then still Maya Thompson, was selecting vegetables at Greenleaf Market, an upscale supermarket in the heart of Oak Ridge Hills, a wealthy suburb of Nashville. She wore a worn but proudly emblazoned Howard University sweatshirt, the institution that had shaped her into one of the top neurosurgeons at Nashville Memorial Hospital. As one of the few black families in the neighborhood, Maya was accustomed to skeptical glances, forced greetings, and a silence laced with prejudice. But today that silence was thick and boiling. It clung to her every step, from the organic produce aisle to the heirloom tomato display. A tall security guard, making no effort to conceal his surveillance, silently shadowed her every move, as if waiting for her to make a sudden grab for her pocket apple +1. She sighed, not out of anger, but exhaustion. In her mind, she was still piecing together the steps for this afternoon's surgery, a particularly challenging craniotomy with a high risk of mortality. At the hospital, Maya was a silent pillar, but in this supermarket, she was merely a suspicious black woman. The atmosphere abruptly shifted when a white woman, dressed in designer clothes, approached and whispered something to the store manager, her eyes darting toward Maya. Maya didn't need to hear the words to guess their content. "My purse! Prescription meds? Stolen?" The store manager, a slender man with thinning blonde hair, name tag reading Brad Stevens, approached her like a TV detective, his voice icy. "Excuse me, ma'am, please come with me." "Wick PD?" Maya looked up, her eyebrows slightly furrowed. "What's going on?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The woman from earlier stepped forward, her face flushed with either anger or well-practiced indignation. "She took medication from my bag when I wasn't looking. I want my property returned and demand her arrest." The store fell silent. Instead of speaking up, those nearby suddenly became engrossed in examining nutrition labels on noodle packages or comparing prices on white radishes. Maya stood still. She wasn't angry, nor was she afraid. She was used to baseless accusations like this. "I've never touched your bag. I'm a doctor. I don't need to steal medication." Brad maintained his stone-cold expression. "We've called the police. They'll handle it." She reached for her bag to get her phone and call her husband, only for Brad to snap, "Keep your hands where I can see them." No one defended her. No one intervened. Maya stood there, a woman who had saved a patient's life that morning, now being treated like a thief, without the right to defend herself. Not a single person spoke up for Maya. Even though the accusation was absurdly baseless, the atmosphere remained thick with silence. Just a few minutes later, 2 police officers entered the supermarket, their hands resting on their holsters in an overtrained reflex. Leading was Officer Derek Simmons, a burly white man with a military dull buzz cut. Behind him, his partner, Officer Trevor Hansen, stood blocking the exit as if to prevent an invisible escape route. "What's going on here?" Simmons's voice rang out, but his eyes were fixed solely on Brad and Karen, completely ignoring Maya's presence. Karen immediately jumped into the conversation with a confident tone, embellishing each sentence with added details, now claiming she saw Maya stuff the medication into her pocket. The story morphed, as if rehearsed in front of a mirror. Simmons turned to Maya, his gaze shifting to suspicion instantly. "Ma'am, I need to see your ID." Maya slowly retrieved her wallet. "I'm Dr. Maya Thompson. I live 3 blocks away on Magnolia Street. There must be some misunderstanding. She hadn't finished her sentence when Hansen interrupted coldly. Just the ID, ma'am. No need for explanations. Maya handed over her driver's license. Simmons glanced at it briefly before passing it to his partner, treating it like a worthless piece of paper. Says you live in Oak Ridge Hills. How convenient, Simmons remarked, his voice dripping with skepticism. I've never seen anyone like you living there. Maya's heart raced. She tried to remain calm. My husband and I just moved in last month. He's Colonel Marcus Thompson, stationed at Fort Campbell. She continued, her voice steady but tinged with pleading. If I could just call him. Simmons laughed mockingly. Oh, then I must be the Secretary of Defense. Turn around, hands behind your back. Maya couldn't believe her ears. On what grounds are you arresting me? Hansen said nothing. He simply stepped forward, tightened his grip on her, and turned Maya around without hesitation. Disobeying police orders is reason enough. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists as they led her through the aisles of the supermarket. The same eyes that had pretended not to notice her now stared wide with open curiosity. Shame, once hidden, had suddenly become permissible. Outside, the brilliant spring sunlight felt cruel, like a mockery of the injustice unfolding. Maya caught sight of a few people raising their phones to film the scene, from a safe distance, of course. Simmons tightened the cuffs, making Maya wince in pain. Please, they're too tight. I'm a neurosurgeon. I need my hands. Hansen scoffed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. A neurosurgeon, huh? Then I must be a NASA rocket scientist. Should I check the employee roster? Maya tried once more, her voice now tinged with desperation. My husband will be worried. I was supposed to be home 20 minutes ago. Simmons leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. Trust me, once we find what you stole, your husband will have much bigger things to worry about. That's when Maya's tough exterior finally cracked. The tears that welled up weren't from fear. They came from a suffocating, searing sense of despair. A familiar ache for someone who had climbed her way through layer after layer of prejudice, only to be buried by it again. She had done everything right by the unforgiving standards society imposed on successful black people. Graduated valedictorian, saved hundreds of lives, married a respected military officer, bought a home in an acceptable neighborhood. But in the face of bias, every one of those achievements meant nothing. The two officers debated whether to search her on the spot or take her to the station. Meanwhile, something caught Maya's eye. A familiar silhouette, unmistakable in form, a convoy of military vehicles moving steadily toward the shopping center. Hansen was mid-sentence, outlining procedure, when his eyes locked onto the sight. What the hell? He muttered, squinting at the approaching vehicles. Simmons, by instinct, adjusted his uniform, a trained reflex at the presence of the military, an institution he had been taught to respect unconditionally. And in that moment, for the first time in what felt like an eternity of despair, Maya felt a spark flicker inside her. Hope? The vehicle doors opened with precision and urgency, each motion clean and rehearsed. The convoy parked in flawless alignment, like a drill performance. At the center stood a large transport vehicle. Its door swung open, and from it Colonel Marcus Thompson stepped out. His uniform was immaculate, adorned with ribbons and medals that shimmered under the afternoon sun. Standing 6'2", broad-shouldered, he carried the unyielding posture forged by 20 years in service. He didn't need to speak. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. His eyes weren't angry, but they burned with restrained fire, an expression all who had served under him would recognize, the calm before the storm. Flanking him were Captain Rodriguez and Lieutenant Williams, moving in perfect sync, forming a tight triangle that exuded both authority and discipline. No one dared move. The way they advanced, with purposeful steps and the unmistakable sound of combat boots against pavement, was like a silent military parade. Marcus had left a strategy briefing at Fort Campbell when he noticed his wife's location hadn't changed for over 40 minutes. After 3 incidents of discrimination since moving to Nashville, he and Maya had agreed to share phone tracking as a survival strategy. When calls and texts went unanswered, Marcus knew something was wrong. A flood of memories returned. The time Maya was shadowed at a luxury boutique while shopping for a gala dress. The night a neighbor called the police because Marcus was seen unlocking his own front door late at night. The time they were stopped at a restaurant because reservations were required. Each time they had stayed calm, filed complaints, and tried to move on. That was the cost of excellence in this world. But this time had gone too far. When Marcus saw his wife in handcuffs in broad daylight outside a grocery store, something in him snapped. He walked forward step by step, not rushing, not hesitating. The sound of his boots against the pavement was like the beat of war drums. He stopped directly in front of Simmons and spoke with a voice clear, precise, and devoid of a single wasted word. "Officer, I am Colonel Marcus Thompson, 101st Airborne Division, United States Army. From what I observe, you are detaining my wife without just cause. I demand an immediate explanation." Simmons blinked repeatedly, momentarily disarmed by the sudden appearance of a power greater than his own. But he quickly regained the fake confidence that had helped him dominate countless people who couldn't fight back. "This is a police matter, sir. I need you and your men to stand back," Simmons said, his voice tight with tension. Marcus didn't move an inch. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a show of force. His words were even, precise, honed by thousands of hours of military command. "My wife is Dr. Maya Thompson, Chief of Neurosurgery at Nashville Memorial Hospital. She called me 17 minutes ago and the call was abruptly cut off. I have both the responsibility and the right to confirm her safety immediately." Hansen stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Your wife is being temporarily detained on suspicion of theft. We are following proper procedures." Marcus quickly scanned the crowd that had gathered, his eyes lingering on the cell phones recording everything. The face of Brad Stevens, the supermarket manager, began to pale, his anxiety clearly visible. Every detail was within Marcus's command, as if it were a battlefield operation. "I understand. So what evidence supports this accusation?" His voice was steady, neither loud nor soft, but it left no room for evasion. Before anyone could answer, Karen Whitfield, the instigator, began to quietly back away, trying to leave the scene. Without even looking, Marcus addressed her, his voice low but commanding. "Ma'am, since you are involved, I ask that you remain until everything is clarified." Karen froze as if turned to stone. She didn't dare look back, but she also couldn't take another step forward. Marcus turned back to face the 2 officers standing at parade rest, spine straight, hands behind his back. It wasn't a threatening stance, but it radiated an authority more powerful than any weapon. "I'm well aware of Tennessee State Code Section 47.13, which outlines the legal conditions for detaining someone without a warrant. From what I see here, none of those conditions have been met. I request that Dr. Thompson be released from the handcuffs immediately." Simmons began to lose his patience. "With all due respect, sir, you can't order the police around." Marcus remained composed. He didn't need to prove anything. He simply pressed the right point. "I'm not giving orders, Officer Simmons." He emphasized the name Tag as if documenting every word. "I'm requesting that you follow proper procedure. Dr. Thompson is the same physician who performed the emergency surgery that saved Chief Donovan's daughter after last year's accident." The mood shifted, the name Donovan was no stranger, and the memory of that near miraculous operation was still fresh in the minds of the force. Lieutenant Williams stepped forward right on cue. "Colonel, should I call the chief directly? I still have his office number from last month's joint training session." Every word, every move, backed by the calm presence of his team, applied pressure without raising a single voice. Hansen blinked, then quietly reached for his keys and unlocked the handcuffs. "There may have been a misunderstanding," he murmured. Maya gently rotated her wrist, feeling the deep marks left by the cold metal. The red lines would bruise by nightfall. Marcus stepped forward and, for the first time during the entire confrontation, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. His eyes landed on the scrape across her cheek, a mark from the earlier scuffle. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Maya nodded. Her face was a mask of steel, composed, professional, betraying no emotion. "I'm fine." Brad Stevens stepped forward, hands raised in apology, his expression conciliatory. "Sir, perhaps this was all just a misunderstanding. If we could handle this privately—" Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Mr. Stevens, there will be no handling this privately." His voice rang out clearly, slicing through the thick air. "My wife was publicly humiliated over a baseless accusation. Any resolution must be just as public." Heron Whitfield again tried to quietly retreat. But this time she couldn't escape Marcus's sharp gaze. He turned fully toward her, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "Ma'am, did you report that Dr. Thompson stole medication from your bag?" Heron stammered. I think I saw her," Marcus interrupted, unrelenting. "Yes or no?" Heron shrank under his gaze. "Yes, but—" I may have been mistaken. At that moment, Captain Rodriguez, who had been quietly recording the entire incident with a government-issued phone, spoke up. "Colonel, I have informed Base Command of the situation. General Phillips sends his regards and asks if you require further assistance." One name, General Phillips, was enough to shift the atmosphere entirely. The crowd had now doubled in size. Phones were still recording. By now, the videos were surely spreading across social media. Marcus nodded slightly to Rodriguez, then turned back to Simmons. "I'd like to see the evidence that led you to believe it was appropriate to handcuff my wife." Simmons stood stiff. "We were still investigating when you arrived, Colonel." Marcus raised an eyebrow, not in surprise but in disappointment. "So you handcuffed a renowned doctor without verifying the reason first? Quite the procedure." Maya gently touched her husband's hand. "Marcus, breathe." He nodded, accepting the reminder as a cue to adjust his strategy. "Dr. Thompson has surgery scheduled for this afternoon. Other people's lives depend on her being there. I believe the misunderstanding has been clarified, and this matter can be resolved promptly." Anson seemed relieved, seeing a way out with his dignity intact. But Simmons still tried to hold the line. "We still need to complete our investigation, Colonel." Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Lieutenant Williams and signaled with his eyes. Williams immediately grabbed his radio and spoke quickly and clearly. "This is Lieutenant Williams, accompanying Colonel Thompson. We are responding to an incident at Greenleaf Market, Oak Ridge Hills, involving Dr. Maya Thompson. The Colonel is requesting the presence of Chief Donovan if available." Mentioning the police chief was a calculated move, and it worked instantly. Simmons and Hanson exchanged a glance, the first sign of visible confusion on their faces. Minutes later, a siren wailed, not as a threat this time, but as the arrival of real authority. Police Chief Richard Donovan, tall, silver mages known for being both tough and fair, stepped out of his vehicle, his eyes scanning the scene. Military personnel, flustered police officers, a crowd with phones held high. The dynamic had shifted entirely. Everyone knew it. Donovan approached, nodding at Marcus. "Colonel Thompson, I didn't expect to see you until the community meeting next month. What's going on here?" He gestured to Marcus and Maya to join him in a quiet corner of the parking lot. But Marcus subtly adjusted their positions so the conversation remained in public view. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Chief, but I believe transparency benefits all of us in this situation." Chief Donovan's smile tightened at the corners. He understood Marcus's strategic posture. "Of course, Colonel. I've been informed there was some misunderstanding involving Dr. Thompson." Maya stepped forward, her voice calm and firm, though adrenaline still buzzed beneath her skin. "I was accused of stealing medication from another customer's bag. No evidence was presented, yet I was handcuffed and threatened with arrest. When I tried to explain my identity and asked to contact my husband, I was interrupted and treated like I was lying about where I lived. Donovan's gaze shifted between Officers Simmons and Hansen, who now stood at attention, eyes straight ahead, tension evident. I believe my officers were simply following standard investigative procedures regarding a reported theft, Marcus interjected, his tone still respectful but razor-sharp. Standard procedure includes verifying probable cause before detention, Chief. And nowhere in the process is it acceptable to question someone's residence based on the color of their skin. That sentence hung heavy in the air. No one challenged it, because it was too clear, too true. Marcus and Maya had met 3 years earlier. At the time, he was a patient recovering from a failed rescue mission in a conflict zone. She was the neurosurgeon assigned to his care. Marcus had been struck by her resilience and silent endurance of pain, while Maya was drawn to his unwavering eyes, never seeking pity and hands that never trembled. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, from physical therapy sessions to recovery evaluations. Love came only after they realized both bore scars the world couldn't see. Now, standing together against injustice, they were unbreakable. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, pushing Maya's shopping cart, still filled with groceries and produce. "Colonel, we've located Dr. Thompson's vehicle. It contains specialized medical equipment." Simmons began walking toward the parking lot, ready to speak, but Donovan immediately cut him off with a firm hand gesture. "Not necessary, officer." Karen Whitfield still stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable as the situation spiraled out of her control. Donovan turned to her. "Ma'am, you reported that Dr. Thompson took medication from your purse, correct?" Karen clutched her designer bag, voice shaky. I thought I saw her near my cart, and then my anti-anxiety pills were gone. Maybe I acted too quickly." "May I see the bag?" Donovan asked, his expression making refusal impossible. Karen hesitated, then opened the bag. Immediately the prescription bottle appeared in a zippered compartment. Her face turned crimson. I don't understand. I was sure it wasn't there before." Marcus stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "And what made you so sure that Dr. Thompson was the one who took it?" Karen couldn't meet his eyes. "I just felt uneasy when she walked down that aisle." That sentence sliced through the air like a blade. Raw, undeniable prejudice laid bare. Brad Stevens, the store manager, realized the situation was unraveling. He rushed forward with a tablet. "We can check the security footage right here." The video played. It showed Maya shopping normally, never once approaching Karen's cart or bag. Frame after frame dismantled the accusation. There was no evidence, only words and biased assumptions. Chief Donovan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the racial bias exposed by his own team's actions. "It seems there was a misunderstanding. On behalf of the Nashville Police Department, I apologize to Dr. Thompson for the inconvenience." That hollow apology hung in the air like a water-stained scrap of paper, lifeless, weightless. Marcus remained expressionless, but his eyes never left Donovan. Calling racial profiling, unlawful arrest, excessive force, and public humiliation a minor inconvenience, you really think that's enough? Marcus's voice was even, cold as steel. The professional smile on Donovan's face faltered. "I understand you're very upset, Colonel." "I'm not upset, Chief," Marcus interrupted, each word delivered with military precision. "I'm informing you that we will be filing a formal complaint against Officers Simmons and Hansen for violation of civil rights. We will also be pursuing legal action against Greenleaf Market and Mrs. Whitfield for false accusation and discriminatory behavior." The atmosphere tightened like a drawn bow. Captain Rodriguez continued recording in silence, his phone now a silent weapon, documenting every second. At the edge of the parking lot, news vans began to arrive, drawn by the videos already spreading like wildfire across social media. Lieutenant Williams stepped forward, speaking low but loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "Colonel, I just received 17 messages from local residents. Several are ready to testify. Some even said they've experienced similar treatment from these same officers. Brad Stevens, the store manager, was pale. He stepped forward, desperate to salvage something. Dr. Thompson, at Greenleaf Market, we truly value all our customers. Perhaps we could offer a shopping credit? As Maya's look froze him in place. Her voice was low and sharp as a blade. Mr. Stevens, do you believe my dignity can be quantified in dollars? Does your store have enough money to cover that? Brad stepped back, bowing his head, knowing he had just made the biggest mistake of the day. At the same time, Officer Hansen quietly approached nearby witnesses, whispering requests to delete the videos. Unbeknownst to him, Lieutenant Williams had shifted position and was recording the entire act. "Chief Donovan," Williams called out, holding his phone up. "Your officer is attempting to instruct witnesses to delete evidence. Would you prefer to handle this yourself, or shall I send this footage to the Army's legal department? What would you do if you witnessed someone being falsely accused right in front of you? Would you have the courage to speak up, even if it meant going against authority? Silence may feel safe, but silence can deepen wounds that no one can heal. If you believe transparency and accountability are foundations of a just society, this story is your wake-up call." And at this very moment, as every eye turned toward Chief Donovan, as cameras captured his every breath, the choice was no longer his alone. It belonged to the system he represented. The standoff in the parking lot grew more intense. Chief Donovan struggled to maintain control as the crowd swelled past 50, each person holding up a phone, recording the rare formation of a social earthquake. At the center of it all, Maya and Marcus Thompson stood like monuments. On either side of them, Captain Rodriguez and Lieutenant Williams formed a line, confronting the increasingly unsettled officers and flustered store management. In the crowd, an elderly man quietly observed. Walter Jenkins, 78 years old, deacon at First Baptist Church, one of Nashville's oldest black congregations. His eyes reflected a familiar sorrow, the weariness of someone who had witnessed too many injustices and too little change. Walter stepped forward to listen more closely, but before he could speak, he clutched his chest, his breathing sharp. His legs buckled, and he collapsed like an old stone. A dry thud hit the pavement. Maya instinctively broke formation and rushed toward him, her body moving on pure medical instinct. She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder, and called out, "Sir, can you hear me? I'm Dr. Thompson, neurosurgeon." He quickly assessed his vitals. Irregular heartbeat, shallow breathing, cold sweat on his brow. "He's having a heart attack. Someone call 911. Simmons stepped in, hand on his holster out of reflex. "Step back, ma'am. You're not authorized to—" But Marcus was already between his wife and the gun in a single step. His voice rang out like a command. "My wife is the chief of neurosurgery at Nashville Memorial Hospital. Stand down, officer, unless you want to explain why you obstructed a medical emergency." Donovan intervened immediately. "Simmons, back off. Let the doctor do her job." Maya began chest compressions, her movements professional and precise, just like the hundreds of emergency resuscitations she'd performed. "I need space. Lieutenant Williams, start timing for me. Captain Rodriguez, check if anyone has aspirin." The crowd quickly dispersed, forming a clear circle in the parking lot, leaving only Maya and Walter in the center. For a moment, the whole world shrank to heavy breathing and rhythmic compressions. Walter's clouded eyes opened, focusing on Maya's face. You're the woman." They were bothering. Maya didn't stop her hands. "Don't speak, sir. Just breathe. Help is on the way." The old man weakly grabbed her hand. "I wanted to help you, but I was too afraid." That whispered confession carried the weight of a lifetime. Decades in which speaking up could mean being ostracized, arrested, or even shot. Maya squeezed his hand. "I understand. Now let me help you." The sound of the ambulance siren grew louder. Moments later, the paramedics arrived with a stretcher and emergency equipment. "Possible myocardial infarction," Maya reported calmly and professionally as they transferred the patient. His name is Walter Jenkins, approximately 78 years old. He collapsed about 4 minutes ago. The medical team swiftly took over and prepared to transport Walter, but in that brief parting moment, his gaze remained fixed on Maya. Between them, an unspoken promise fulfilled, an elder saved by a new generation that refused to yield. "I performed chest compressions, no medication administered yet," Maya said quickly, her tone steady. The paramedic in charge recognized her immediately. "Dr. Thompson? We didn't know you were here." "I was here on another matter," she replied shortly. The EMTs worked rapidly, coordinating with Maya to stabilize Walter Jenkins. One of them turned and said, "If it weren't for your quick intervention, he might not have made it." That statement echoed through the still tense parking lot. Walter was gently lifted onto the stretcher by hands that knew they were handling a piece of living history. Before being loaded into the ambulance, Walter reached for Maya's hand once more. "Thank you, Doctor. I'm Deacon Jenkins from First Baptist Church. I should have spoken up when I saw what they did to you." Maya gave him a soft smile, her eyes forgiving but unforgetting. "Rest now, Mr. Jenkins. We'll talk when you're better." No one in the crowd could have imagined that just minutes earlier, this woman had been in handcuffs, publicly humiliated and judged. Now she stood tall as a living symbol, a doctor, a hero, a human being who would not be broken. The officers who had escorted her now stood powerless, silent. The television cameras captured it all, from her degradation to the moment she saved a life to the cinematic reversal of roles. This moment would become national news. Maya's phone rang. She answered, nodded, then spoke briskly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She turned to Marcus, concern on her face. "There's a developing subdural hematoma at the hospital. The patient is a 16-year-old. The on-call doctor is stuck in traffic. They need me now." Marcus nodded and turned to Chief Donovan. "Chief, my wife needs an emergency escort to Nashville Memorial. A teenager's life depends on her timely arrival." Donovan hesitated for a second, then nodded. "I'll arrange it right away." And Marcus, tactically precise, added, "I believe Officers Simmons and Hanson are available for the escort." Donovan understood the blow. Having the very officers who humiliated Maya now protect her, nothing could be more appropriate. After a beat, he gave the order. "Officers, escort Dr. Thompson to Nashville Memorial. Priority level, highest." Simmons began to object. "Sir, with all due respect—" "That's an order," Donovan snapped, his voice sharp. Maya maintained her calm expression as she stepped into the police car, like it was a limousine. She didn't let herself soften. Not now. She had pushed through bias, doubled her effort to earn half the recognition, and now she was on her way to save another life, in the very vehicle that had shackled her less than an hour before. Marcus held her hand for a moment before she left. "I'll take care of everything here. See you at the hospital." As she sat in the back of the police car, Maya felt the full weight of everything. Of sacrifice, of resilience, and the undeniable truth that in a country where prejudice still lurks in every corner, she, a black woman, had not only survived, but risen like a beacon that could not be extinguished. Even in her Howard University sweatshirt on a day off, Maya was seen like so many others who looked like her, guilty until proven exceptional. In the back of the police car, Officer Hanson adjusted the rearview mirror and glanced at her. "We'll have you at the hospital within 10 minutes, Dr. Thompson." The courteous words rang hollow, painfully ironic in contrast to how he had treated her less than an hour earlier. Maya met his eyes in the mirror. "Officer Hanson, that teenage boy doesn't care about what happened between us. He just needs the best chance to survive. So please, help me get there safely." The rest of the ride unfolded in silence. The police car now had its lights flashing and sirens wailing, not to arrest, but to escort a doctor racing to save a teenager's life. A bittersweet paradox straddling the line between prejudice and redemption. When they arrived at the ER entrance, medical staff were already waiting. Hospital Director Dr. James Richardson personally greeted Maya. "Dr. Thompson, everything is ready. All 3 ORs are prepped. We have the CT scans. The medical team gathered around Maya like an elite unit. What they carried was a respect that no one could deny. So different from the suspicion she had just endured. Before stepping through the hospital doors, Maya turned to Simmons and Hansen. "Thank you for the escort." Simple words, neither bitter nor resentful, but it was the calmness in her tone that made Hansen look down. He knew she had surpassed him, not with words, but with integrity. Maya moved swiftly into the hospital, toward a life that needed saving. In her mind, Marcus's voice echoed like a vow. "They need to see. We cannot be broken." Clinging to that thought, Maya Thompson, D., Chief of Neurosurgery, entered the operating room to do what she did best: save lives. Whether others believed she deserved to or not. While Maya was deep in emergency surgery, the Greenleaf Market incident spread rapidly across social media. Multiple videos from different angles recreated the entire sequence: the baseless accusation, Maya's composed professionalism, the blatant bias of the police, Marcus's authoritative intervention, and finally, Maya saving Walter Jenkins. The hashtag Justice for Dr. Thompson trended nationwide within hours. Medical professionals across the country voiced outrage. The military community expressed anger over the treatment of a colonel's wife. Marcus sat in the hospital waiting room, his uniform neatly folded beside him. Across from him sat attorney Elijah Washington, an esteemed figure in civil rights litigation. "Body cam footage will be key," Washington said, typing rapidly on his tablet. "I've filed an emergency motion to preserve all evidence, store surveillance, police audio recordings, and all related communications." Marcus nodded, every movement reflecting his disciplined training. Lieutenant Williams recorded the moment Officer Hansen tried to convince witnesses to delete footage. Everything had shifted. It was no longer just about honor. It was about truth, and this time truth wasn't going silent. "Captain Rodriguez documented everything from the moment I arrived until Dr. Thompson entered the hospital," Marcus added, eyes fixed on the screen. Elijah Washington looked up, his eyes razor-sharp. "Instructing witnesses to delete video is direct evidence tampering. That's not just misconduct, it's systemic." He opened the officer's personnel files on his tablet. What appeared next thickened the air. "Simmons has 7 complaints for excessive force against minorities, all dismissed without investigation. Hansen has 3 similar incidents and is under review for something that happened last month." Washington's tone grew heavier. "This isn't coincidence. This is a pattern." Outside the hospital, the media swarm had grown. The story had all the elements of national headlines: a brilliant black doctor, a decorated colonel, blatant racial bias, and the cruel irony of a woman wrongfully treated like a criminal, saving a life immediately afterward. Inside, the hospital's leadership moved quickly to protect one of their own. CEO Dr. James Richardson personally brought coffee to Marcus. "Colonel, the board chair has issued a public statement in support of Dr. Thompson. Our legal team is standing by to assist in any way necessary." Meanwhile, Greenleaf Market posted a hasty apology on social media. "We deeply regret the incident involving Dr. Maya Thompson and are taking corrective actions, including the termination of the manager involved." Brad Stevens was fired just hours after the incident. The company moved quickly to distance itself from the growing media crisis. Erin Whitfield fared no better. Social media quickly identified her as the false accuser. By that evening, the real estate firm she worked for announced her suspension pending internal investigation. Public response was swift and overwhelming. Most expressed outrage at Maya's treatment. However, a small segment defended the police, claiming they were just doing their job and blaming Maya for being uncooperative. Many of those comments, often from anonymous accounts, revealed a clear undercurrent of racism, evidence of a rot that remained deeply embedded. After 4 hours in surgery, Maya emerged, exhausted but successful. The teenage patient was stable. Despite severe injuries, the prognosis was improving. In the locker room, as Maya changed out of her scrubs, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The bruise on her cheek, from being handcuffed and struck, was now clearly visible. She gently touched it for the first time that day, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability when no one was watching. The door opened. Dr. Amelia Carter, a colleague from cardiology, stepped in. "Maya, you were incredible today. The entire hospital is talking about it." Maya turned away, slipping her professional mask back on, one she wore far too often. "Just doing my job, Amelia." "In the OR and at the supermarket," she replied quietly, her tone calm but tinged with bitterness. Amelia paused, her eyes softening. "The hospital stands behind you 100%. We all do." The words were genuine, but they couldn't erase the scar of experience. Maya thanked her colleague and stepped into the waiting area, where Marcus sat surrounded by paperwork and legal documents. He stood the moment he saw her, wrapping her in a gentle embrace, one that understood her exhaustion, both physical and emotional. "Surgery was successful," she said simply. "Good," he replied, just as brief. They had learned to speak in efficient fragments like during Marcus's recovery from combat, where every breath was precious. Lieutenant Williams entered, his expression serious. "Colonel, Doctor, apologies for the interruption, but there's been a development. The military command at Fort Campbell has issued an official statement condemning the treatment of a senior officer's family member and calling for a full investigation." The incident had now moved beyond the jurisdiction of local police. Mayor Patricia Collins had also called an emergency community meeting for the following evening to discuss the incident and its implications for police-community relations. As Marcus and Maya prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Richardson and the hospital security team approached. "Dr. Thompson," Colonel Quall, "an escort is waiting to take you home. We've received concerning messages from pro-polis individuals circulating online. The implication was clear. A routine grocery trip had become a security threat for their entire family." On the drive home, Maya scrolled through dozens of messages from friends, colleagues, and patients. Words of support and stories of their own experiences with racial discrimination. A common thread in every story. People of color constantly striving for perfection as a shield. And sometimes, even that isn't enough for respect. As their car approached their Oak Ridge Hills home, Marcus frowned at an unmarked vehicle parked at the end of the street, facing directly toward their driveway. "Security?" Maya asked, noticing his change in expression. "Not our people," Marcus replied, coldly memorizing the license plate without betraying suspicion. "Could be a reporter, could be police surveillance." The message was clear. This wasn't over. Inside the house, Maya finally let her guard down. Her hands trembled as she set her keys on the table, the shock suppressed all day now bursting into a flood of emotion. Marcus gently led her to the couch, holding her as the tears began to fall. "I did everything right," she whispered through tears, resting her head on his shoulder. "Graduated from Howard, then Johns Hopkins, board certified, published research, saving lives every day." Her words broke between sobs, not from weakness, but because she was finally allowing herself to feel the pain. Beneath the white coat, beneath the title, beneath the badge reading Chief of Neurosurgery, was still a human being, bearing wounds no scan could detect. "And none of it mattered, because I'm a black woman in a sweatshirt," Maya said, her voice broken, nearly hopeless. Marcus said nothing, just stroked her hair. Everything he had been trained for in the military, discipline, tactics, survival instincts, felt powerless on this battlefield. The inhumanity of a system masquerading as civilized. After showering and changing, the two sat side by side, reviewing the documents attorney Elijah Washington had prepared. Formal complaints would be filed the next morning against the two officers, Greenleaf Market and Karen Whitfield. Marcus knew the process would be long, possibly years. This fight was no longer personal, it was systemic. As they were getting ready for bed, Maya's phone rang. Unknown number. She glanced at Marcus, then answered on speaker. "Dr. Thompson, this is George Simmons, father of Officer Simmons and president of the police union." His tone was soft, but beneath it lay an unmistakable layer of veiled threat. "I understand there was an unfortunate incident today. I only hope you recognize that pursuing complaints against officers acting in the line of duty could have long-term consequences for everyone involved." Marcus and Maya exchanged a look. No words were needed to recognize the warning. "Mr. Simmons," Marcus said, his voice that of a man who had commanded life and death, "I'm Colonel Thompson. If you're threatening my wife, you should know this call is being recorded and will be forwarded to our attorney first thing in the morning." Silence. Then George Simmons' voice returned, this time coated in a syrupy sweetness. "No threat at all, Colonel. Just a reminder of how things like this tend to end. Have a good night." After the call ended, Maya sat on the edge of the bed as if bearing the weight of a courtroom on her shoulders. "They're not going to let this go, are they?" she asked softly. Marcus gripped her hand, his gaze as resolute as forged steel. "They may never have, but we have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth," he said firmly. "And we're going to make sure everyone hears it." George Simmons didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, the police union launched an aggressive counter-campaign across local media and social platforms. Sources close to the investigation claimed Maya had been combative and uncooperative during a routine check. Others insinuated that Marcus had abused his military authority by bringing armed personnel to intimidate local law enforcement. The attacks didn't stop at public opinion. 3 days after the incident, Maya and Marcus woke to find a racial slur spray-painted across their garage door. When they called the police, it took nearly 2 hours for officers to arrive. The responding officers appeared indifferent, scribbled a few notes, and dismissed it as probably just kids messing around. One officer forgot to photograph the scene until Marcus subtly reminded him. Even then, he did so with clear reluctance. The psychological warfare continued. When Maya returned to the hospital, she found that several of her surgeries had been reassigned to other doctors, under the vague explanation that patients requested it. The ambiguity itself was proof of a silent, coordinated campaign. Dr. Richardson called her into his office, his expression heavy with concern. "Maya, I just received 3 anonymous complaints questioning your competency. Per policy, I have to file them. But I want you to know, I believe these are retaliatory and baseless." Maya stayed composed. She was no stranger to attacks aimed at her professionalism, the very pillar of her identity and pride. "Thank you for the transparency, James. Is there any specific allegation I need to address?" Richardson shook his head. "No, and that's the point. The content is so vague, it only reinforces that this is political." While Maya faced professional sabotage, Marcus was summoned to meet with Colonel Frank Harrison, a high-ranking, staunchly conservative officer known for rarely taking meetings. "Thompson," Harrison began bluntly, "there are concerns you may have overstepped by involving military personnel in a civilian incident." Marcus stood at attention, his expression neutral. "Sir, I was responding to an emergency involving my wife. Both Captain Rodriguez and Lieutenant Williams were on leave and participated voluntarily." Harrison's displeasure was evident. "Public perception matters, Colonel. We don't need the hassle of appearing to challenge civilian authority." The warning didn't need to be spelled out. Marcus's spotless career was now under threat from an incident he hadn't even initiated. And yet, despite the quiet storm building around them, support for the Thompsons grew stronger. Walter Jenkins, now recovering from his heart attack, mobilized his church community. First Baptist Church, a cornerstone of Black history in Nashville, hosted a combined prayer vigil and community forum. Over 300 people attended, publicly declaring their solidarity with Maya and Marcus. At the event, attorney Elijah Washington gave a legal update. Despite police departments stalling, the case was pressing forward. Amidst it all, Maya received an unexpected email from an investigative journalist named Zoe Carter. "Dr. Thompson, I spent the last 18 months studying patterns of police discrimination in Nashville's affluent neighborhoods. Your experience fits a troubling trend I've documented. Would you be willing to share your story?" After consulting with Washington, Maya and Marcus agreed to meet Zoe at the law office. Zoe arrived promptly, dressed simply but meticulously. She brought a digital presentation mapping dozens of similar incidents across wealthy neighborhoods in Nashville. Each red dot represented someone who had endured what Maya had, only without cameras, lawyers, or public backing. What you went through isn't isolated, Zoe explained, displaying a health map of police stops. This is the rate of traffic stops involving black individuals in predominantly white areas. She pointed to Oak Ridge Hills, a blazing hot spot on the map. In this neighborhood alone, black people, whether residents or visitors, are 7 times more likely to be stopped than white people, even though they make up less than 4% of the population. She scrolled to another screen. More troubling is that Officers Simmons and Hansen appear repeatedly in the data. They were assigned to patrol Oak Ridge Hills at the direct request of the neighborhood association. This revelation opened a new line of inquiry. Marcus, leveraging his military contacts, accessed non-country real estate records. They discovered the home he and Maya had purchased via a relocation company had a history. The previous owners tried to sell to a black family 3 years ago, Marcus said as they sat at the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere. The deal fell through at the last minute after the HOA cited concerns about property values and community compatibility. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a chilling portrait of a quiet but effective exclusionary system. The HOA didn't take long to retaliate. Within days, the Thompsons began receiving a barrage of violation notices for petty infractions. Trash bins left out too long, a mailbox 2 inches too tall, the front door paint deemed aesthetic mismatch for the neighborhood. Each notice came with a sarcastic reminder about maintaining community standards and threats of fines. Amid the storm of pressure, Maya received steadfast support from an unexpected source: the hospital. Her colleagues, led by Dr. Amelia Carter, formed a medical escort team, ensuring Maya never had to walk alone through parking garages or isolated hallways. "I overheard some off-duty cops at a bar talking about you," Amelia recounted, her voice tight with concern. "They said if your house needed an emergency response, there might be unfortunate delays." Marcus, using his military network, also reinforced his wife's security. Officers and military families, especially those of color, began sharing their personal experiences with local police. They spoke of unwarranted stops, suspicious stares, and nonverbal actions that didn't require paperwork to leave a lasting impact. Captain Rodriguez, leveraging his access and analytical skills, compiled all the testimonies. He assembled a comprehensive, detailed dossier exposing a pattern of harassment targeting black military families across Greater Nashville. Everything escalated when Maya received an anonymous message: "Withdraw your complaint or your patients will pay the price." And no subtlety. This was a direct attack on the very core of Maya's ethics, the place where she defined herself as a doctor devoted to the safety and well-being of others. She immediately notified attorney Elijah Washington, who added the threat to the growing legal evidence file. "What would you do if you were systematically threatened just for standing up for justice? Would you be person 1, pushing forward with resilience like the Thompsons, or person 2, convinced the personal cost is too high?" When systems are challenged, they often react by defending themselves at all costs. But if we remain silent, injustice will continue to flourish. If this story resonates with your experience or brings to mind someone harmed by injustice, like, follow, and stay tuned as this fight for justice unfolds. Because the Thompsons aren't just up against a single act of discrimination. They are confronting a system, one designed never to admit it's wrong. But what they're about to uncover will change everything. In their home office, Marcus sat in front of a bank of digital screens, equipment most civilians would never access. His military intelligence background gave him not only knowledge of the technology, but the ability to wield it as a precision weapon against injustice. Captain Rodriguez had provided Marcus with a specially configured laptop, software normally reserved for counterterrorism operations. "This stays between us," Rodriguez warned. Some battles can't be fought with conventional weapons. For a week, Marcus quietly compiled digital data. He didn't hack. Everything he gathered was legally stored, time-stamped, and court-admissible. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a young officer at the precinct unable to stomach the corruption he witnessed daily. He granted Marcus access to a private chat group frequented by Simmons, Hansen, and 12 other officers. What Marcus read was worse than he expected. "Bagged another one today," Simmons wrote 3 weeks before Maya's incident. "Luxury car, designer clothes, but doesn't belong in Oak Ridge." Made sure he got the message. Subsequent messages were filled with praise, racist memes, and crude jokes about black individuals. Another thread was titled "Community Cleanup," a discussion on harassment strategies used to drive minorities out of affluent neighborhoods. "The HOE appreciates when we keep the resident file stable," Hansen wrote, followed by slurs too vile to print. Marcus missed nothing. He backed up the chat logs, timestamped them, encrypted the data, and stored it in multiple secure locations. When he shared the findings with journalist Zoe Carter, her eyes widened in shock. "This isn't just targeted harassment," Zoe said, her voice low. "This is an organized conspiracy involving high-level officials. The overlap between the police department and the Oak Ridge Hills HOA is especially alarming." Further investigation revealed that George Simmons, Officer Simmons' father and president of the police union, held a board seat on the HOA despite not living in the neighborhood. It didn't stop there. Brad Stevens, the former store manager, frequently reported suspicious individuals to the very same group of officers. The replies were often filled with thanks and vague phrases like "taken care of." Meanwhile, Maya launched her own investigation inside Nashville Memorial Hospital. As chief of neurosurgery, she had access to outcome data used in internal quality assurance programs. After a systematic review, she found a disturbing trend. Black patients brought in by police had longer wait times and worse outcomes than those arriving by ambulance or private vehicle. "It seems medical staff are unconsciously influenced by how police treat the patient," she explained to Marcus, showing anonymized data. "When a patient is treated like a suspect, the care team, though unintentionally, tends to deprioritize them, even when triage suggests otherwise." Hospital director Dr. James Richardson was visibly shaken when informed. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice heavy. "We need immediate corrective action." Richardson, once hesitant to broach issues of race, had changed completely. He stood up during an emergency board meeting and declared, "The board has voted unanimously to issue a public statement of support for Dr. Thompson. Nashville Memorial Hospital condemns all forms of discrimination and acknowledges the severe harm caused by systemic bias in healthcare." The statement was set for release on the same day as the upcoming community hearing organized by Deacon Walter Jenkins. Now fully recovered, Walter had become the Thompsons' most powerful ally, rallying not just his congregation, but a coalition of civil rights organizations and police oversight groups. Meanwhile, the military's internal investigation concluded. Captain Rodriguez handed Marcus a sealed envelope, a military police report on the body cam footage from Simmons and Hansen. "There are signs of tampering," Rodriguez said gravely. 18 minutes of footage, right at the height of the confrontation, was deleted. Further inquiry revealed a stunning fact. Both Simmons and Hansen had previously served in military police units, but were dishonorably discharged. This information had been omitted from their applications to the Nashville Police Department. A serious act of resume fraud. That revelation opened yet another layer of violations, falsified employment records with fabricated military histories. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Williams, quietly pursuing his own line of investigation, focused on financial connections between the police department, the neighborhood association, and local businesses, including Greenleaf Market. What he uncovered revealed a troubling pattern: undisclosed benefits, gifts, and special privileges granted to officers in exchange for maintaining a stable appearance in affluent communities. As evidence against Simmons and Hansen mounted, George Simmons became increasingly desperate. He approached Lieutenant Williams at a local cafe, unaware that Williams was a key collaborator in the ongoing investigation. "You seem like a reasonable man," George began after some small talk. "The Thompson situation is getting out of hand. Maybe you could help cool things down by clarifying what you saw that day." Williams kept a neutral expression. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Mr. Simmons." George quietly slid an envelope across the table. "A small token of appreciation for your military service. My son has always respected veterans who understand the challenges of maintaining order." Williams, who was wearing a hidden recorder provided by Attorney Washington, carefully avoided touching the envelope. "You're offering me money to change my statement, aren't you, Mr. Simmons?" George flinched, stepping back. "No, not at all. I just hoped you might offer a fairer perspective from someone who sees the bigger picture." The entire conversation was recorded and would later become a pivotal piece of evidence in the broader investigation. Amid the rising tension, an unexpected event unfolded at Nashville Memorial Hospital. Officer Hansen's 8-year-old son was brought in after a severe bicycle accident with a traumatic brain injury. The attending emergency surgeon that day, Maya Thompson, despite the humiliation inflicted on her by the boy's father, Maya performed the emergency surgery with full skill and dedication. She saved the child's life and prevented permanent neurological damage. Hansen sat alone in the surgical waiting room, his gaze heavy with the realization that his son's survival now rested in the hands of the woman he had once treated like a criminal. When Maya stepped out, her expression remained professional. "Your son will make a full recovery," she said. Hansen stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. "Thank you," he stammered, knowing full well the words were inadequate. Maya nodded gently. "He'll need postoperative monitoring. My office will contact you to schedule follow-ups." Her commitment to medical ethics transcended personal offense, and that alone, not angry words, was the harshest indictment of Hansen's conduct. As more truths came to light, Police Chief Donovan found himself cornered. Pressure from the media, the community, the military, and now the justice system was closing in. "If you'd like, I can continue with the public hearing, where all evidence is brought into the open, and Maya stands not only for herself, but for the thousands who've suffered in silence." The honor of the entire police department was now in question. Several officers under Chief Donovan's command were directly implicated in a pattern of organized misconduct. After reviewing a wide array of evidence from Attorney Washington and journalist Zoe Carter's investigation, Donovan proactively requested a private meeting with the Thompsons. "I've served in this department for 27 years, he began, seated in Attorney Washington's office. "I used to believe our job was to protect the entire community, but what I've seen in your files says otherwise." His face reflected visible conflict and regret. He placed a small USB drive on the table and nudged it toward Maya and Marcus. "This contains internal documents. I think you should see them. Officially, I can't provide this, but let's just say someone misplaced it." The drive contained explosive material, emails, messages, and internal directives linked to the Thompson case, including instructions to delay the investigation of their home vandalism and proposals to apply pressure via civic and media channels. Most damning was an email from George Simmons. "Find something, anything, to discredit Maya or Marcus. Doesn't have to be true, just enough to change the narrative." Donovan's covert cooperation marked a major turning point. Fragmented evidence now formed a full picture of systemic corruption and racial bias, far beyond a single abuse of power at a supermarket. Maya reviewed everything with Washington. In silence, she stared into the distance. "This was never just about me," she said, her voice soft but weighted. "This is about a system built to determine who's worthy of protection and who's meant to live under suspicion." Washington nodded slowly. "And now we have enough to challenge the entire system." The United States Department of Justice officially launched an investigation. They agreed to pursue a civil rights inquiry based on the accumulated evidence. All eyes now turned toward a national hearing, a landmark trial poised to set precedent for communities across America. The DOJ hearing room was tense with silence. Though packed with civil rights delegates, local officials, journalists, and community representatives, not a whisper was heard. Maya sat at the front table between Marcus and Attorney Washington, her posture straight, her gaze unflinching, a symbol of resilience standing before an entire system. Today's hearing wasn't just about Maya's story. It was a gateway into the quiet architecture of power, how it decides who belongs and who does not. As she walked to the witness stand, Maya felt each beat of her heart, not out of fear, but because she carried the voices of countless black professionals who had been dismissed, sidelined, or nearly lost their lives simply for being in the wrong place. She thought of her father, who taught her to keep both hands on the wheel, visible at all times. For safety, he said. But they both knew he meant survival. She thought of her mother, who always told her to keep receipts while shopping. Of her brother, an attorney at a major firm, still followed step by step in retail stores. Once sworn in, Maya began recounting the Greenleaf Market incident with clinical clarity, precise, logical, no embellishment, the tone of a surgeon, focused, methodical. She detailed how Karen Whitfield falsely accused her, how Brad Stevens instantly assumed guilt, and how officers refused to check her ID or let her call her husband. When she described being handcuffed in the parking lot, her voice remained steady, but emotion rippled through the room. The officers laughed when I said I lived in Oak Ridge Hills, Simmons said verbatim. I've never seen anyone like you live there. When I mentioned my husband's military rank, Officer Hanson sneered. Then I must be a rocket scientist. Attorney Washington guided her testimony with strategic questions, gradually revealing the deep structure of bias. From assumption to overreaction, Maya described the humiliation of being handcuffed in front of grocery store customers, the pain of the tight restraints, and how her plea to protect her hands, her life-saving tools as a surgeon, was coldly ignored. When asked how this incident compared to previous experiences of racial discrimination, Maya paused for a moment. This wasn't the first time, but perhaps it was the most exposed. She recalled her advanced science class in high school, where she was the only black student, and the teacher who throughout the year would repeatedly ask, "Are you sure you're in the right class?" I learned very early that excellence alone wasn't enough. I needed documentation, proof, credentials, just to justify my presence in places where others walked in unquestioned. Her testimony continued, accompanied by visuals projected on a large screen, graduating top of her class in medical school, receiving research awards, performing complex brain surgeries. Each achievement was more than personal glory. It was a silent declaration. I am human too. I deserve to be treated fairly. Marcus was called next. The discipline of a military officer was evident, but he spoke not as a soldier, but as a black husband in America. As a military officer, I take pride in serving this country. But as a black man, I live in a constant dual awareness, patriotism, and the understanding that this country has never treated people like me fairly. He explained every choice he made that day, why he brought two plainclothes comrades, why he stood where security cameras could see, why he documented everything. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival built on lived experience. Next. Surveillance footage was shown, Maya shopping normally, never approaching Karen Whitfield's cart. Then came the body cam clips from the two officers, revealing clear disdain, frequent interruptions, and no attempt to verify her identity. Worst of all, an 18-minute gap right during the most intense moments had been deleted from the footage. The missing 18 minutes perfectly aligned with what witnesses described as the peak of Maya's mistreatment. Officer Jenkins, the whistleblower who exposed the internal chat group, was called to testify. There's an understanding in certain precincts, Jenkins said slowly but firmly, that some neighborhoods need to be kept clean. That's their term, not mine. He clarified areas like Oak Ridge Hills were always under special surveillance. Anyone who didn't fit the mold became a target. Testimony from a fellow officer silenced the room. No longer speculation or suspicion. This was a covert policy sustained in the shadows. The next surprise came from Karen Whitfield herself. Initially defensive and evasive, her demeanor cracked under Attorney Washington's calm, persistent questioning. "I didn't actually see her take anything," Karen confessed, clutching a tissue, eyes glistening. "I just felt uncomfortable seeing her walk down the aisle wearing a sweatshirt. She didn't look like someone who shops for expensive organic produce." Her brutally honest words stilled the room. No polite phrasing could mask the bias anymore. It stood bare. "And what did Dr. Thompson do that made you uncomfortable?" Washington asked. Karen lowered her head. Nothing at all. She was just there." No more needed to be said. Maya's mere presence in a space Karen didn't believe was for people like her was enough to spark a chain of humiliation. The police department's lawyer tried to redirect, suggesting Maya was uncooperative and that officers were following protocol after a theft report. But the tactic backfired when Washington produced the police department's official procedures manual outlining the specific conditions for making an arrest without a warrant, all of which were unmet in Maya's case. During the recess, Maya was approached by a young woman in a doctor's coat, clearly a medical resident. "Dr. Thompson," the woman said, voice trembling slightly, "I'm a second-year resident at Nashville General. I just want to thank you for standing up. So many of us have gone through this, but don't have the platform or voice to fight back." Her words reminded Maya why she had pursued the case, not just for herself, but for those without a stage to speak their truth. When the hearing resumed, Zoe Carter presented her independent investigative findings, maps, charts, and statistics, all pointing to clear patterns of racial discrimination in affluent neighborhoods like Oak Ridge Hills. Officers Simmons and Hansen appeared in the data at far higher rates than their peers, even after accounting for patrol schedules. The evidence against George Simmons was even more damning. Lieutenant Williams' secret recording proved he attempted to bribe a witness. Internal emails revealed him as the architect of the media and legal pressure campaign against the Thompsons. When George took the stand, he quickly unraveled. Evasive, contradictory, visibly flustered. All pretense collapsed. The most powerful testimonies came from the community. Ordinary people who had endured similar injustices. Walter Jenkins, deacon of First Baptist Church, stood, voice raspy but resolute. "I've been a deacon for 37 years, served on the city's education board, and still I drive miles out of my way just to shop where I won't be looked at with suspicion." After him, doctors, lawyers, professors stepped forward, recounting being asked for ID without cause, stopped for not looking right, or being treated as threats in spaces where others moved freely and unquestioned. When Maya returned to the stand one final time, she was asked to reflect on the broader meaning of her experience. The fact that Black people must reach levels of excellence just to be treated as ordinary, Maya said, voice clear and firm, may be the most dangerous form of modern racism. We can't just be good, we have to be perfect, beyond reproach, exceeding every standard. And even then, as my experience proves, it may still not be enough. As her testimony ended, Officers Simmons and Hansen sat beside their lawyer, faces tense, no longer united. Each began shifting blame, trying to minimize personal responsibility. George Simmons was escorted from the hearing after attempting to approach the judge during recess. A federal agent overheard a threat and intervened immediately. All the evidence had now built a case that could not be denied. A coordinated system of discrimination, maintained by multiple layers of authority, protected from within. Exactly the kind of civil rights violation the Department of Justice was created to address. As Maya and Marcus stepped out of the hearing room, media and supporters swarmed them. But they maintained their quiet dignity, not for personal victory, but because they knew the real fight was only just beginning. The next challenge was clear. Could the system, once forced to see itself in the mirror, correct its own course and deliver the justice it once promised to all citizens, regardless of race or background? 6 months after Maya was handcuffed at Greenleaf Market, the Nashville Police Department changed in ways no one had anticipated. Officers Simmons and Hansen were dismissed following an internal investigation that confirmed multiple serious violations of protocol and constitutional rights. Both were criminally charged for civil rights violations, Hansen additionally for fabricating evidence and deleting body camera footage. George Simmons faced a litany of indictments: corruption, witness tampering, conspiracy to abuse power, and misuse of public resources. The quiet pressure George tried to exert on Lieutenant Williams backfired spectacularly. The recorded conversation became a key piece of evidence in the federal case against him. The police union, once unwavering in its support for him, severed ties. A new leadership slate was elected, one committed to accountability rather than protectionism. The Department of Justice's investigation did not stop with a few individuals. It expanded to scrutinize the entire structure of the National Police Department, exposing deeply rooted, systemic patterns of biased behavior. The outcome was a federally mandated consent decree, mandatory implicit bias training, the establishment of a civilian oversight board with real authority, revised use of force policies, and required public disclosure of disciplinary actions. Police Chief Donaldson, in his final year in office, embraced reform as his legacy, determined to leave behind a reimagined department he chose transformation over denial. As for Karen Woodfield, after pleading guilty to filing a false report, she was sentenced to community service at the food bank of the First Baptist Church, working alongside those she once viewed with suspicion. The experience changed her profoundly. She later became an informal spokesperson at community forums on unconscious bias, a person who had erred but had learned how to make it right. Oak Ridge Hills, once a community that quietly excluded people of color through HOA policies, now formed an inclusion council, led by Walter Jenkins. They released decades of records showing how selective approvals, bias penalties, and vague standards had effectively redrawn the red lines of modern segregation. What surprised many? When those practices ended, property values remained stable, shattering the myth once used to justify discrimination. With George Simmons and several others removed from the HOA, a new generation of leaders emerged, focused on building community, not policing appearances. Maya didn't stop at statements. She launched a mentorship program for Black medical students, equipping them with the emotional and practical tools to survive in environments not built for them. We still have to be excellent, she told the next generation. But excellence is no longer our only shield. We are building a system where dignity doesn't demand perfection. At the hospital, Maya and the leadership team enacted sweeping reforms, removing bias-prone data points from patient intake procedures and conducting regular audits to detect disparities in treatment. Marcus, meanwhile, was officially promoted to colonel, tasked with developing a national initiative to bridge the military and civilian law enforcement communities. The program's focus: resolving tensions between police and Black military families. Marcus chose not to confront, but to connect, bringing officers, soldiers, and community leaders to the same table to create new standards: respect, listening, and coexistence. Though the Thompsons won on a systemic level, the personal cost was steep. Maya, who had once stood unfazed through marathon surgeries, still sometimes felt her heart race in grocery stores or unfamiliar spaces. She wasn't afraid anymore, but she was always alert, a conditioned reflex that wouldn't fade. Marcus continued scanning every street corner, every vehicle parked too long near their home. The strategist in him couldn't fully relax, even with the war ostensibly over. They had considered leaving Oak Ridge Hills, but ultimately stayed. "If we leave, it sends the wrong message," Marcus once told Maya. "This is our home, and we've paid enough to live here, in peace." Another test of Maya's professional faith came unexpectedly. Officer Hansen's mother suffered a stroke and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The attending physician on call, once again Maya Thompson, She performed the surgery like she would any other, with full skill, without bias, and without hesitation. Days later, Hansen came to the hospital. When he saw Maya in the hallway, he approached slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want you to know I understand now. I was wrong, not just that day, but for many years before it." Maya Owen nodded, neither affirming nor dismissing, like someone who knows real change must pass through shame. The Thompson family later hosted a neighborhood cookout in their front yard. Every neighbor, including those who once averted their gaze and stayed silent the day Maya was arrested. They shared food, shared stories, and the silence of the past was replaced by genuine laughter. That gathering became a quarterly tradition where invisible walls were dismantled inch by inch through the simplest of acts, sharing meals and words. At Nashville Memorial Hospital, a training program was launched to help staff recognize and dismantle bias in medical treatment. Inspired by Maya's experience, the program became so successful that other hospitals in the region began replicating it, triggering a chain reaction of reform across the regional healthcare system. Exactly 1 year after the incident, Maya returned to Greenleaf Market, the place where it all began. The store now had new management, a diverse staff, and a community commitment statement proudly displayed right at the entrance. As Maya bent down to pick out vegetables, in the same aisle as before, an elderly woman with silver hair approached her. "Excuse me, are you Dr. Thompson, the neurosurgeon?" Maya paused for a moment, then nodded. "My grandson was in a terrible car accident last year. You were the one who operated on him at Memorial," the woman said, her eyes welling up. "I just wanted to thank you. You saved his life. Thank you for skill, not skin, for expertise, not suspicion," was perhaps the deepest reward the Thompson family had fought to achieve. In their home office, Maya and Marcus hung a special frame, a newspaper article about the case, alongside Marcus's military medal and Maya's medical award, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a marker that real change doesn't begin with slogans. It starts with a single step taken by two people who chose to stand firm and refused to back down. The headline, displayed in glass, read, "Wrongfully Arrested, a Turning Point for Police Reform." That frame wasn't just a record of the injustice that happened. It was proof that with enough determination, change is more than a dream. The Thompson case became a key case study in national police training programs, a real-life example showing how bias can override protocol and lead to devastating consequences. But more importantly, it underscored a core truth. Accountability is not punishment. It's the necessary adjustment for the legal system to keep its promise of equal justice for all. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your own community? What did you do? Have you ever stood up to injustice or wished you had? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might give someone the courage to speak out who's been suffering in silence. Thank you for walking this journey with us, from injustice to resistance to transformation. The story of Maya and Marcus Thompson is more than a single incident. It is a powerful reminder that excellence does not shield people of color from prejudice, that systemic discrimination is a tightly woven network spanning law enforcement, housing, and healthcare. That evidence is the most powerful weapon in the fight for justice. That change requires both personal courage and collective strength. That reform is possible, but demands persistence and unwavering resolve. And above all, justice is not just about punishing the wrong. Justice is about building a society where dignity doesn't need to be earned, where respect doesn't require extraordinary achievement, and where accountability not only protects the innocent, but also helps those who have failed learn how to do better. If you found this story meaningful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because change always begins with one person brave enough to say no. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered, should I speak up? Can one voice really make a difference? Or perhaps you've been that person, and you had to choose between speaking up or protecting your peace. Your story matters. In this ongoing journey toward justice and equality, every lived experience is a vital link in the chain. Share yours in the comments below. Who knows, your voice might be the strength someone needs to finally say no to injustice. If you were moved by Maya and Marcus's journey, an ordinary family who dared to confront the system, please hit the like button. That small action helps spread this story to those who need a reminder that hope still exists. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the stories of ordinary, courageous people working each day to change reality. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear this message. A simple thank you, a new perspective, a spark of hope might come from this very video. Thank you for joining us on this journey from the shadows of injustice to the light of hope. And remember, a more just world doesn't require perfection, it requires honesty, the courage to face what's broken, and above all, the unshakable belief that if we act together, we can begin to make things right.